Hi, Simone, and welcome to Talking Allergies. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, Grace.
Simone, could you give us a little bit of a synopsis about you and what you do for the allergy community?
I am a counsellor and I work in the mental health space relating to allergies and the mental health relating to that. Or I'm also a registered nurse of more than 30 years, and I was a neuro nurse, so that's brains and backs. And so that gave me the love of the mind. And then I went on further to study psychology and counselling to marriage the two. So I do kind of health anxiety or health, mental health, chronic conditions, things like that, and especially allergies or life-threatening conditions, really, or chronic conditions.
Did the passion in the space of allergies come from anywhere in particular?
Yes, I have a son with severe allergies, food allergies. So when he was 6 months old, he had a severe anaphylactic reaction to dairy. I had been breastfeeding him for the 6 months, and then I tried to wean him onto formula milk, and there was no pre-warning really, no eczema or asthma or family history like so many other stories. And so on that day, our world changed completely. And that's what brought me to understanding allergies. And then with the nursing side of things, I also saw a really big gap in people being newly diagnosed with chronic conditions and not having the mental health support there. So I kind of got into it from a nursing perspective, not relating to allergies. And then when I had my child, I wanted to really build on that gap.
That's a very big reaction for the first reaction of anaphylactic reaction straight away. How did you manage?
Oh, it was 17 years and 8 months ago. I remember it like yesterday because it was that big. I knew what was happening because I'm a nurse, which actually made it probably a little bit worse or better. I don't know. Because I knew how quickly I needed to access support. But because we had no family history, we had actually just moved to a new country, Switzerland. I didn't even have the emergency number in my mind. So I was really grateful that my parents from Australia happened to be there to look after my 16-month-old older son. And I literally was washing him down in water, trying to get some of the dairy out of his mouth. I was trying to breastfeed him to flush out some of it, to dilute some of it. But I had no emergency medicine with me at the time. And there was a clinic 300 metres down the road. It's really the only reason we are so blessed to have him still with us, because it was, as you say, it was an extremely severe reaction for his first.
I'm so glad that there was a clinic 300 metres down the road. It's amazing that in a new country, and that you've gotten there and he was able to recover.
Yeah, there wasn't a lot in support of him, but then going down the road, they had the emergency facility there within the clinic. They had a helicopter landing, that could pick him up and things like that. So he was in great hands once we got him there.
That's fantastic to hear. What were the changes between that day and the rest of kind of bringing them up?
Because he was so little, it went from, I was only breastfeeding him probably at that stage, and then I continued only breastfeeding him until we got some specialist expert knowledge. So it probably took a month or so to get into the major children's hospital in that area that we're living. And then we got told that he couldn't eat so many things: dairy, wheat, egg, peanuts. tree nuts, beef at one stage, chicken, soy, and it just was a whole lot. And they would give us, again, it was another language, and they would give us sheets saying he's allergic to dairy, therefore he can't have da, 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 da. Oh, he's allergic to wheat, so he can't have da, 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 da. And then, so he can have that, but oh, hang on, he's allergic to dairy, so he can't have that. So it was a really big change. It went, I was probably a little bit grateful that I hadn't really introduced foods to him as yet, because I then continued to breastfeed. And he then had specialised formula milk, dairy-free, special formula milk that was offered to him. But our worlds changed completely, because even where we were living, the ambulance service wasn't great. So we had to have a plan and a protocol of that. He couldn't have an EpiPen Junior. He was too young. So we had to have other emergency medication. So predominantly I went from, already our world was a little bit upside down because we had moved to a new country. I didn't have supports around me at that stage, but also then I had to manage a new country, a young toddler, and then a young baby as well. So things went from being hard to really difficult, actually, at that stage. They're really challenging.
What would you say to someone that's in a similar space to where you were?
Everyone's journey is their own, I would say, first and foremost. So don't get caught up in my story per se, but how it looks for you. For me, if I was to go back, I would surround myself with a really, really great support team. That's medical people, friends, family, if possible, people that understood, a whole village to support us in different areas. So the medical team, friends and family for the emotional support, counsel psychology for the mental health support, dietitians if you need, nutritionists if you need, like a whole support team around you, a bit like a tent. We don't just have one rope anchoring a tent for if a storm comes or if there's any changes or challenges. We have all these different ropes securing into the ground, and that will just hold you steady to get through any challenges that might arise or any support you need. I tried to do it all myself. I found it challenging to understand it myself, therefore to articulate and ask for support was also very difficult. But that's how I would kind of stay in my own lane, but also learn and grow from other people, but also surround myself with great supports.
You said that there were different challenges that you went through. Was there any particular challenges that you did reach out to someone, or?
We did have a dietitian work with us. I also flew back to Australia to work with a food coach. That was really, really good, because we had so many food groups that were eliminated for us. We did try to keep the foods in our home, but because I had two young ones in nappies, I was feeding them both. Still, I had a couple of accidents that I just then decided at those younger years to have the house free of certain big food groups, which then meant I really needed to understand how we could use other foods to make sure everyone had the right nutritional benefits in our diet. So I did that. I reached out to some other allergists and immunologists, and I reached out to my family as well, which was really important.
That is really important.
After we had a couple of anaphylactic reactions, I also brought a mental health professional into our lives as well for trauma recovery and things like that for myself and my oldest son, who we were the two that happened to be there for each of the reactions. So that also was really important in trauma recovery and rebuilding trust, confidence, and things like that. So, yeah.
As someone that experiences trauma in those situations, is that normal for someone?
Yes, it is quite normal, actually. We see it quite often, and trauma is accumulative, and we don't have to have the same trauma repeat itself. So we did have that situation happen, unfortunately, and it does build on each other. So if we don't recover or process the trauma, then it will come back. And we've seen that through COVID and what's going on in the world at the moment, that actually it doesn't have to be the same trauma that repeats itself, but it's accumulative. So it can be, people quite often say, well, they only had a small reaction and that was enough to stop them from, going to parties or restaurants, or they don't want to return to school, or they don't want to go out and expose themselves to foods anymore. But this was so small compared to some of their other reactions. And then I explained to them that actually trauma is one of those things that are cumulative, and therefore it's on the back and builds up to where it then kind of cascades and overflows. It's a healthier way to process trauma each and every time, to see an expert, to see a professional to process that. But if you don't, then that's okay too. But it is normal to actually have that. With food allergies, it's a little bit even more challenging to process, because for if I was working with someone for trauma recovery, say from a fire or a flood or a car accident or something like that, we normally take the person away from the situation, and then we're able to recover and process that trauma. With food allergies, it's quite a bit challenging, because we actually have to live life in a food-centric society still, where we're still faced with eating meals, being around other people eating food, maybe going to a restaurant for a social event, going to a party still. So the recovery is a little bit more complex, and it's quite interesting for me to work with people in that space.
Of course, thank you. When did you start supporting people with allergies with counselling services?
About 6 years ago.
Thank you for all that you've done in the community so far.
Yeah, I supported people in the mental health space 6 years ago, prior to COVID, online and around the world. But my son and I, Oliver and I, started a support group page, Oliver's Choice, probably about, I want to say 13 years ago. And we did a lot. We started off with sharing recipes first, and then any experience he had throughout his life, because there's lots of different milestones in a child's life. So, starting kindergarten, going on their first flight, starting primary school, going into secondary school. And so we just kind of utilize that page to share information. We shared products, we shared recipes, and just shared his day-to-day. He wanted to do that. And it was a good way to give back to the community. And that's something as well we see a lot. There's been a lot of research in post-traumatic growth, which is quite a positive result of post-traumatic stress. So when people are able to flip, and a lot of people like yourself and a lot of other allergy advocates I know, they've had the lived experience and they want to actually share this with their community to be able to help them. And that's a part of that post-traumatic growth and giving back to their community. So I kind of started with Oliver's Choice, and then when I saw everything going in the medical field with the growth in mental health understanding, I wanted to really then work in the allergy community, more so with the mental health side of things.
How have you seen allergies impact on mental health?
I've seen the impact on mental health throughout our own journey, but with people understanding mental health more and more as the years go by, especially post-COVID, there is a greater understanding of that. How I see it is the biggest things are, I like to sit in the realm of preventative mental health. So I love to gear people up with the strategies and techniques before the crisis is too large to cope, because that's what it is. But in reality, I normally see people for trauma recovery, grief and loss. There's a lot of grief and loss associated. If you're a family living one way of life and then all of a sudden you have this chronic condition, life-threatening, as a part of your family, then there can be big changes within that, what that looks like. There's sadness, anger, there's acceptance eventually, and then there's finding meaning in the future. The other things I see is a lot of anxiety, fear, overwhelm, stress. I do a lot of work around that, especially anxiety. Rebuilding confidence is a big one. Motivation for if a child has been told to avoid a food for years and years and years, and then let's say in a teenager's years, they've outgrown their allergy as per the tests, but then the allergist would like to challenge them or put them on a food ladder, then that is a really big psychological shift for anyone. And I do a lot of work in that space. Reframing the situation. A lot of parents have this idea of this child, oh, I feel so bad for this child. How are they going to live? And just reframing the situation to the parent because the child knows no different. So really doing a lot of education around that and mental health and wellbeing around that, but really just building a toolbox of tools for coping with all of these situations is a big part of, my work and how I've changed or how I understand allergies impact mental health.
Could you go through any of those aspects of a toolbox that someone would use?
Yeah, so depending on what they present with will depend on the tools that we work on and add to their toolbox. The biggest one through, research and science is deep breathing. And there's a reason for that. When we go into fight or flight response, which a lot of us are sitting at, when we live with anxiety, heightened anxiety, then deep breathing is a way of consciously regulating that breath. So when we go into fight or flight, there are physical symptoms from a healthy, intelligent brain. The body starts preparing us to run faster or for fight harder. And then it physically has changes like adrenaline, heart racing, short, shallow breaths to actually allow for the oxygen and blood to go to our arms and legs rather than to our mind because we want to fight harder. So those symptoms, the vagus nerve connected to the back of our brain down our spinal cord to our gut is responsible from going from relaxed state to fight or flight state back to relaxed state. So if we can manually turn it back off when we know the situation is safe and we're only feeling like this because of a perception of something that might happen, anxiety is high, then that's the number one tool. If we're too high on the scale of anxiety, heightened emotions, then the deep breathing may not work. And like any exercise, the more we practice it, the more powerful it becomes, right? So then if it's too high, then there's grounding exercises that we work on with our five senses. There's questioning our thoughts. Are they real or unreal? Are they rational, irrational? There's distraction strategies that we use. There's like so many, and it really just depends on if I'm working with someone to reduce anxiety. There are some tools would use, but if I'm working with someone that is trauma recovery, I'd use a whole lot of other tools, confidence building. There's why are we doing this? What do we do to keep ourselves safe? There's positive statements. This is tough, but so am I. I can do this. So there's a whole lot of tools for each and every situation that's presented. I always say that the mind, what I work with are thoughts, feelings, and behaviours, outcomes, actions. So anything relating to those three things is something I can help and support with.
So it was a great understanding of the toolbox, and depending on what the person is experiencing, that they need different things, like the tent that you were talking about before.
Yeah, I like to actually, that's a really good, the way I use a toolbox is I give the analogy, and I like to use a lot of analogies because they kind of resonate with people and there's a greater understanding. But It's like if I was a tradie that went to a job, let's say an electrician. I don't know what I'm actually going to be doing once I'm there, but I've got my toolbox of tools. I might need to use a screwdriver, but if the screwdriver doesn't work, I don't panic. I go into my toolbox and find another tool that will work. And if we feel our mind is in control of us and we're not in control of our mind, then we panic. So it's all a part of building a toolbox so we have different things that we can tap into to calm our mind so we're in control of our mind and it's not in control of us. Sometimes it has to be in an emergency situation. Sometimes it likes to trick us, but ultimately we're in control of our mind. So it's really building that power to be empowered in any situation, if that makes sense.
Yeah. How does empowerment help someone with allergies or the people living around them?
Quite often when we live with a chronic condition, especially a life-threatening one such as allergies, we feel disempowered. We feel quite often out of control. We feel that this is, kind of dominating our life rather than us, managing this. So it's just bringing all of that back. So once we feel empowered again, well, we know knowledge is our superpower. And to decrease anxiety, we want to understand more. So knowledge is really powerful in that. And when we're empowered, we are more in control to manage our situation, even if we feel, unaccepting of it at that stage. It's a better way for our mindset to be to then move forward positively.
Does mental health affect the person with allergies and the people living around them?
Look, that's a very individual question, and it's very individual. So, but generally, yes. As a general response, yes, it does. For our situation, it affected probably me first and foremost as a primary caregiver. My child knew no different when they were young. Then the second person affected is probably my oldest son, because we together saw every, really severe allergic reaction. So then we were the first two that was affected with our mental health. And then as my younger child grew older, they understood more. And at about 8, 9, 10, they have a huge psychological development and they understand fear and mortality and things like that more. So I think we're all affected as humans with our mental health. How we manage it and monitor it, it depends on situations. And some people are more susceptible to emotional reactivity than others. So it's also individual. And generally, if we have a threat of anxiety in our family prior to allergies, it will be exacerbated by the situation. But there's so much we can do to manage that.
Thank you. Why is it important to know the difference between severe allergy anxiety and an allergic reaction?
Oh, so it is one of the greatest things I've worked on with people, because anxiety at its heightened levels presents physically with similar symptoms to anaphylaxis. So that's a really, really tricky one for people living with severe allergies, anaphylactic allergies, because sometimes they can think that they're having an anaphylactic reaction when it could be heightened anxiety. Once we understand ourselves through self-awareness, once we have an understanding of what anxiety is, because quite often people don't understand what anxiety is, heightened anxiety, then the person is able to differentiate between the two. But as I was saying earlier, heightened anxiety, the mind doesn't care if it's rational, irrational, real or unreal. It will start preparing for fight or flight. It's an amazing, intelligent brain doing what it needs to do to protect us, but it's up to us to work out if it's real or unreal. So if we understand that if my throat, because then when the body flushes with adrenaline and other hormones and the heart's racing, we can feel quite hot. We can feel stomach aches because our digestive system shuts right off. We can actually feel like we need to vomit. We can have diarrhea depending on the severity. We can feel like we're having an elephant sitting on our chest, which sometimes can be identified as not being able to breathe. Sometimes we get a dry throat, scratchy throat, tight throat, we can feel dizzy. And these are all similar, symptoms of an anaphylactic reaction, depending on how we respond in an anaphylactic reaction. So it's really important that outside of the food times, we understand what our anxiety looks like, how it presents in us individually, to be able to do that mind work that I work on with people. Another tool is questioning our thoughts, finding the evidence for those thoughts. Well, hang on, I'm eating my lunch at school around other kids that are eating foods that I'm allergic to, but I know my lunchbox is from home. I know that I packed that with my mum or dad. I know that all the ingredients in there are safe. So I'm safe. So then I can do the deep breathing. I can relax myself to see if those symptoms go away or they continue to escalate and get worse. So it's doing the work outside of food times to then know ourselves and know our body and know what our body does with anxiety. So that's the really importance in understanding anxiety, therefore to be able to differentiate between anxiety and anaphylaxis. I hope that's answered your question.
It did. Thank you so much. It's really important to understand how you're going as well. When should someone with food allergies see a counsellor?
Look, that's really individual. I'm in the profession, in the medical profession and in the mental health profession. I am a big believer of prevention. Right. So I would prefer to see someone before they have a reaction or before they go for a food challenge, when they're first diagnosed and it feels all so overwhelming. If we've built a relationship and trust and rapport prior to that, the work is easier. It's smoother. I kind of liken it to if I was to see a dentist. I don't really like dentists. So if I have a relationship with a dentist prior to getting a toothache, I'm going to feel more comfortable in ringing them and saying, oh, I have a really bad tooth. My anxiety is up a little bit, but I would feel more comfortable in going to see them. It's the same with a mental health professional. If a parent is thinking about their child, bringing a child to see me, I always say, let's just meet so we can build a relationship, because it makes it easier for that. And we'll be adding tools to the toolbox regardless if they need them or not. These are life tools for each and every one of us. They will be utilized forever, young or older. And it's not going to hurt. We might have 1 or 2 sessions. But when should someone come and see me? Well, the key times I see people, if I can answer the question backwards, is newly diagnosed and a big change in the family. When they're tweens or teens, so going through a big change in their life psychologically and in their own environment, where they'll be managing things a little bit more on their own, later years in the primary school, going into secondary school, going out by themselves. If they've had an anaphylactic reaction, so recovery from that traumatic experience, if they've regressed in what they're eating, if they're going to have a challenge, if they're going to introduce new foods and they're having difficulties with those, if they're going on a holiday or a big change in, going on an aeroplane, they've never been on an aeroplane, a family, it could be the parents, it could be the child, whoever, going on camp, starting school, all of those are big milestones in any child's life or family's life, but adding severe allergies to them is just an extra layer of strain on our mental health. Hopefully that answered the question, but it's a tricky one to answer.
Definitely understanding those milestones and adding food allergies on top is really, really impactful in someone's life.
Yeah. I see a lot of people that say, this is our life, so we just need to learn how to live with it. And I find that a shame because we can thrive and not just survive. So quite often when we say those things, we're really just living in the survival mode rather than the thriving mode. And I feel where I can come into it, or any mental health professional, is really stepping out of that survival mode and into the acceptance, finding new meaning in the future. What does it look like? And really then thriving safely. And we can really do so much in that space as mental health professionals.
Who would you see most that comes to you for counselling?
I just did stats on this recently, so I know. I did some because I like to keep on top of who I see. Now, this is not because of any other reason than I think they are more proactive now in doing this, is the primary caregiver normally, which is normally the mum, right? So that's probably 50% of the people that I'm seeing. Then tweens and teens are a big portion. So their parents have come to see me, they've done some work with me, and they then say, oh, okay, actually, I think this would be a benefit to my child as well. And I say, yeah, really good age to start doing this kind of processing, building of the toolbox. We might see each other 1 or 2 times. Maybe you want to check in every month, because then other stuff comes in at those ages, right? Starting high school is big. And then if you've already got a rapport with someone in the allergy world, we go into a lot of other topics then with kids. So it's really quite great for the parents to have an extra person that their child can reach out to for any of those situations. And we know in this day and age, we have so much post-COVID with mental health and wellbeing, right? There's so much in the teenagers. And then my next group of people would probably be, and this is post-COVID, I love kind of 24 to 32-year-olds. It's a beautiful age group that I really, until COVID, don't reach out for support that much, only because their lives are so busy. So much is happening in those years that they don't really stop and need to consider their mental health and wellbeing. It's just flowing and it's happening. But since COVID, I think people are more aware. They've been stop-starting, and it's really had an impact on their mental health. But I love working with that age group because they're so ready, they're so willing, and there's only a few sessions that we need, and they're really just focused and back on track. So, yeah, they're the 3 main groups I work with.
Thank you. Has there been a milestone that you've been proud of with the work that you've done with people with food allergies?
Probably my book. My book, I felt, could really reach out to everyone. So even if you didn't really want to tap into sessions one-on-one with any mental health professional, the book has so many tools, techniques, exercises, strategies that can really help people, even just feeling like you're not alone. I've had a couple of people say your book just felt like a big warm hug, just that I wasn't by myself. Someone else understood. I can't believe that someone else is living the same life and thoughts that I'm thinking. And probably that was the biggest, even though it was published and released at the start of COVID. So it didn't have from my side, didn't have the release as I was hoping it would to reach the amount of people I was hoping it would reach, but it has been picked up all over the world. And that's amazing. For me, it was really good if I could just support one family and just make it a little bit easier for them, knowing they're not alone. That was worth it for me.
Where can people find this book and more about your services, Simone?
Probably my website's the best place to go for the one-stop shop. But so my website is foodallergycounselling.com. So www.foodallergycounselling.com. You can look at what services I offer. You can book online there. My books are on there and where you can buy it. and all that I do. But your own website, Allergy Life, I have other allergy advocates pages that have my book, but any of the major online book buying sites, so Amazon, America, Australia, New Zealand, Fish Pond, book, whatever your go-to purchasing of books is, it's available.
So what is the title of the book for everyone trying to search it up right as we speak?
Good, good idea. So Beyond the Allergy Diagnosis. So it's a guide to understanding and navigating the emotional and psychological phases of allergies. So it's written from a perspective of a parent, a primary caregiver, raising a child with allergies. I've had a couple of adult people living with allergies asking for a similar book. But really the book can be utilised for anyone. It's just the stories may not resonate with the young adult, or even I've had people that have gone through divorce that have said they can use this book with the strategies and techniques. They're at the end of each chapter. It's the same guides.
Thank you so much for joining, Simone, and for talking about your story, your counselling services, a little bit of tips and tricks for people. Is there anything else that you would like to share with the allergy community or someone that has just started their journey?
I think we've covered so much. I think that reaching out for support can be sometimes the hardest first step. And I hear quite often that once I've done that, whether it's with a friend, an allergist, a mental health professional, whoever it is, they just feel a weight lifted, because a problem shared is a problem halved. And really you don't have to feel you're alone. It's hard sometimes when you're really living it, consumed by it, to even have the mental energy to give back to yourself. But reaching out is one of the best first steps you can do.
Thank you so much, Simone. That was a lovely point to end with. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you so much for having me, Grace, and thanks for all you guys are doing as well.